I'm sorry, are we pretending numbers don't mean things now? I said it under my breath, but the whole boardroom heard it. That's the exact moment the CEO, Derek, with his laminated hair and a grin so smug it needed its own non-disclosure agreement, paused mid-sentence and looked directly at me. We were in the middle of a $30 million pitch to Series D investors, and this man had just referred to my audit findings as a cute little cautionary tale. Cute, like misreporting foreign income was a kitten video, like manipulating deferred revenue was adorable. The investors chuckled nervously. The CFO looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. And me? I just smiled, the kind of smile women develop when they've been talked over by mediocre men for 20 years and have stopped waiting to be rescued. Anyway, if you're listening right now and you're part of the 97% who somehow forgot to tap that subscribe button, I mean, come on. These stories don't narrate themselves. It's free, it helps the team, and if you don't, Derek wins. Nobody wants that, so where was I? Right, Derek. He waved a hand at the screen behind him, my screen, my work, and said, "We've got great momentum. Don't get distracted by the noise in these internal reviews. They're for compliance, not storytelling. Storytelling. As if my 18-page risk memo on channel stuffing and questionable expense timing was just a bedtime fable. As if the spreadsheet tabs labeled urgent SEC exposure and Q3 adjustments potential liabilities were fan fiction. Here's what they don't tell you about being a senior financial analyst in a company that's growing faster than its ethics. You stop being a person. You become a plot hole. A footnote. Paperclip icon in someone's fantasy about an IPO. Derek wanted a narrative. I had the truth. And for 5 years I tried to make those two align. I flagged risk profiles so glaring even interns were whispering. I reported on liabilities buried deeper than Derek's humility. And every month, like clockwork, my reports were edited, softened, spun, or ignored entirely. At first, I argued. I'd write long emails with footnotes and links to FASB standards. I'd walk into meetings armed with highlighters and printouts and old-school financial righteousness. But over time, I realized Derek wasn't confused. He was deliberate. This wasn't ignorance, it was performance. He didn't miss the red flags. He painted them green, and I learned something else too. Arguing with power only works if power cares, so I stopped arguing. Instead, I started archiving. Every original report, every raw data set, every risk analysis that got whitewashed before a board presentation, I zipped it, encrypted it, and emailed it to myself. Private email, military-grade password, monthly habit, like brushing teeth but for legal self-preservation. No one knew. Not the CTO, not HR, not even that wet paper towel of a CFO who once asked if material misstatement was a typo. I didn't do it out of paranoia. I did it because something in me, some exhausted, fed up, quietly furious part, knew the day was coming. The day Derek's narrative would crack. The day the numbers would stop obeying him. The day investors would ask questions he couldn't answer with charm and buzzwords. And when that day came, I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to plead or threaten or make a scene. I was just going to hand them the truth. Zip file included. I caught Derek alone in his glass office the Monday after that investor meeting, the one where my life's work got turned into punchlines. He was scrolling through Slack like nothing had happened, grinning to himself like a man who just farted in a room full of interns and called it leadership. I shut the door behind me, quietly. No theatrics, just two professionals, or at least one. "Hey, got a minute?" I asked, already unrolling a printed copy of the Q3 report I'd edited 3 times before they butchered it for the deck. "Sure," he said without looking up. "If it's about the tone of your slides again, we already decided they were too. What did marketing say?" Alarmist. I slid the pages across his desk. "No, this is about the contents, not the tone. We overstated revenue from the New Delhi rollout by 18%. Expenses tied to R&D got mislabeled as capital expenditures. That's not just bad optics, Derek. That's fraud adjacent." He looked up at me then, blinking slowly like I was speaking a language he hadn't downloaded yet. "This isn't a courtroom, sweetheart," he said, leaning back like a man confident in his own bullshit. "It's tech. Nobody cares how you categorize it as long as the narrative plays. You're hung up on technicalities. Accounting laws aren't technicalities." He smiled like I just told him a bedtime story. "What you call risk, I call creativity." And there it was. The moment I knew we were not two professionals. We weren't even playing the same game. I was building a dam and he was drilling holes in it to install fountains. He didn't dismiss me, not right away. That came later. But I could feel the shift, like standing on a frozen lake and hearing that first crack. 2 days later, HR summoned me for a chat. The HR director, Vanessa, a woman who weaponized empathy the way Derek weaponized charm, sat me down with a pained smile. "We just want to give you some feedback," she said, clasping her hands like she was praying I'd behave. "Some of the team felt your tone in the last few meetings was adversarial, especially in front of investors." "I was pointing out material risk," I said. "That's my literal job description." I know, she cooed. "But maybe just deliver your insights with a bit more emotional intelligence. You catch more flies with honey, right?" Apparently. Now I was a fly trap. I asked if legal had raised any concerns about the Q3 presentation. She blinked twice, smiled tighter, and said they've reviewed the materials and signed off. We're all on the same page. That was the moment I realized there were no allies left. Legal was on mute. The CFO, Doug, who once asked if deferred revenue meant a typo in our QuickBooks, wasn't going to do anything except forward emails and pray. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a design. Derek didn't want analysis. He wanted applause. He didn't want me to catch the fire. He wanted me to fuel it. That night, I sat in my car for 23 minutes outside my apartment, just staring at the dashboard while the radio played some hollow pop song that sounded like everything and nothing at once. I wasn't sad, not exactly. I was done. Done trying to explain that earnings manipulation wasn't strategic timing. Done writing reports that got torn apart and repackaged with cartoonish optimism. Done being the adult in a room full of toddlers with MBAs. I walked into my apartment, made tea I didn't drink, and opened my laptop. I created a new folder on a private encrypted drive, named it simply Unspun. Then I started uploading every unedited report I'd ever written. Not to fix things, to document them. The first time I sent a report to my private email, it felt like stealing from myself. It was a Tuesday night. Everyone else had already left the office. Their Slack statuses flipped to green dots of pretend productivity. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed like they were the only ones left telling the truth. I sat alone in my cubicle, uploading a ZIP file named Q4 unredacted internal zip to a clean, encrypted Proton Mail account registered under a pseudonym I hadn't used since grad school. The password? A line from my grandmother's old recipe book. Nobody, and I mean nobody, was guessing that. Each report got its own archive. Raw data, Excel sheets with formulas intact, email threads confirming review timelines, and annotated PDFs showing where the final presentations creatively diverged from reality. I included screenshots of Slack messages, internal approvals, and version histories. I didn't redact a single word. I wanted the timeline preserved in full color. Every upload was followed by a secondary backup. Cloud folder, external SSD, cold storage USB locked in a fireproof safe. By week 3, I'd automated the whole thing into a routine. Every last Friday of the month, export right arrow, zip right arrow, encrypt right arrow, send. Private ritual, like brushing your teeth after drinking poison. I looped in one person, Cal Whitaker, my lawyer, a bulldog in tweed, former SEC enforcer, known in quiet corners of finance for burying white-collar criminals with their own Outlook folders. We had lunch once a quarter, mostly in silence. The kind of man who'd nod when you slid a flash drive across a diner table and not ask a single question until you said, "It's time." I hadn't said that yet, but the flash drives were ready. Then the sabotage started. It began with routine credential updates. My access to the Ledger platform was downgraded. No more direct exports, only summaries from finance ops, a team Derek had conveniently filled with spreadsheet-illiterate yes-men. Next, the company's compliance software, previously my domain, was centralized under legal. Suddenly, I needed approval to run the same quarterly queries I'd built from scratch. Then came the VPN throttling. Files timed out. Session logs mysteriously ended early. IT shrugged and blamed bandwidth issues. Meanwhile, Derek's assistant, a woman who once asked if accruals were some kind of rash, now had editing permissions on our investor decks. They didn't fire me, not yet. They sidelined me like a slow leak, hoping I'd quietly drain myself out. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I got smarter. I printed things. Yes, printed. I knew damn well that digital trails can vanish faster than integrity in an earnings call. But hard copies, those survive. I stored binders at my cousin's place, labeled Tax Prep 2016-2021. You think that's paranoid? Derek once had the IT department wipe someone's machine because they accidentally sent a PDF to a journalist. HR called it a compliance breach. I called it a preview. By May, I was on read-only mode across most systems. They claimed it was due to restructuring workflows. Right, the same restructuring that left my calendar empty and my projects reassigned to Doug, who once asked me if you could delete liabilities like cookies. But I smiled. Smiled when they CC'd me instead of including me. Smiled when legal forgot to loop me into risk discussions. Smiled when my badge stopped working on the 12th floor because I had the receipts. And the timeline, and every lie they tried to bury came with a corresponding spreadsheet that said, "We knew, we all knew." By the end of that quarter, I wasn't an employee anymore. I was an archivist. Cal called it insurance. I called it the truth, just waiting for its moment. The lights were too bright, the fonts too big, and the truth nowhere in sight. The company had rented out an event space that looked like a rejected Netflix set. Faux exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs dimmed to authentic innovation glow, and a catered breakfast bar filled with foods no one actually eats while committing securities fraud. It was roadshow day 1. The investors had flown in, the camera crews were rolling, and Derek strutted onstage like a televangelist pitching salvation through synthetic KPIs. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, mic clipped to his tailored collar, "what you're about to see isn't just numbers, it's momentum." The screens behind him burst to life with graphs so steep they looked like ski slopes for billionaires. The title slide, "Sustained Profitability in Volatile Times," I nearly choked on my complimentary green juice. From the back row, my new kingdom of irrelevance, I watched him click through doctored slide after doctored slide. Margins widened, losses evaporated, and user growth became an unsourced miracle, even repackaged layoffs as leaning into operational agility. Translation: we fired people and are pretending it was on purpose. There was my Q2 forecast, or at least the Frankenstein's monster version of it. They'd taken my numbers, stripped out the footnotes, relabeled deferred income as realized revenue, and slapped on a chart that made it look like we were printing gold bars out of SAS. He said we'd reduced regulatory exposure by 60%. That was cute, we hadn't reduced risk. We just moved it offshore into a shell corp with a Cayman Island mailbox and a name that sounded like a discount vitamin brand. I looked around the room. Most of the suits were nodding, eyes glazed like they were being hypnotized by the rise of our fictional line graphs. But then I spotted him, Reed Kaminsky, private equity warhorse, only man in the room who'd ever grilled me on variable interest entities and thanked me afterward. He was staring at the screen, head tilted slightly, eyebrow raised just a hair. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to tell me he saw it too. I didn't wave, I didn't whisper. I just sat still and took mental snapshots. Slide 12, net retention YoY growth, 142%. My actual report said 92%. Even that was optimistic. Slide 15, legal liabilities fully resolved, except we still had an open inquiry with the DOJ, conveniently postponed due to remote operations. Slide 19, client confidence, all-time high. Meanwhile, I had 2 separate internal memos warning of customer churn due to contract manipulations. Derek beamed at his graphs like a man proud of lying under oath and getting away with it. Trust is the foundation of this company, he said with a straight face. And our numbers tell a story of resilience. The word trust did something to me. It made my throat tighten, not from sadness, from restraint. Because I wanted to laugh, to scream, to stand up and shout, that's not what the numbers say, but I didn't. I sat there with my notepad, scribbling timestamps, slide numbers, and lies. This wasn't the day. The trap wasn't sprung yet. Let them smile. Let them toast our momentum with mimosas and slide decks. Let Derek believe the fiction he'd rehearsed for weeks, because I had the originals, the real reports, the emails, the financials that showed where the bodies were buried. And I had time, the kind of time that makes predators sloppy, so I let them lie, and I watched. The email came at 7:06 a.m. Subject line, organizational update. Not from Derek, not even from Vanessa in HR. Just a nameless sender and a calendar invite tagged final touchpoint. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for a moment, letting the coffee brew and the silence settle. Funny thing is, I'd prepped for this moment so long, it felt like deja vu. Like reading the ending of a book you'd already underlined and read 6 chapters ago. When I walked into the HR conference room, neutral walls, stale air, and a strategically placed box of tissues, I already knew. Vanessa was there, of course, sitting stiffly with a folder marked confidential offboarding. Beside her was a new guy I hadn't seen before, someone from employee experience whose job, apparently, was to say things like, "We're grateful for your contributions," without flinching. No Derek, of course not. The man could pitch vapor to venture capitalists, but he couldn't be bothered to face the woman who kept his fantasy from collapsing. Vanessa began with a breath so long I almost timed it. As you know, we've been reevaluating our organizational structure to better align with evolving business priorities. I tuned her out after that. I'd read this script 100 times. Hell, I'd written versions of it back in my junior HR analyst days, before I realized integrity doesn't get you promoted, optics do. So your role is being eliminated as part of a broader team restructuring initiative. She said it like a dentist explaining an amputation. Polite, efficient, surgically distant. I waited for the feedback welcome portion. It never came. Please return your laptop and any company property today. IT will process the handover. We'll need your badge as well. I placed the laptop on the table like a peace offering. It was wiped clean, reformatted twice, every cache purged, every file vacuumed into the void. There wasn't so much as a sticky note left behind. The badge followed, still warm from my pocket. I slid it across the table. It landed with a satisfying little click. Vanessa didn't look up. The new guy smiled like he'd been trained to. Your severance will be processed within 5 business days, he said, handing me a manila envelope like it was a parting gift. We'd really appreciate it if you didn't share internal details as you transition. Ah, the NDA, the paper muzzle, the please don't burn the house we're looting. I tucked it into my purse without reading it. My exit interview lasted exactly 10 minutes. No questions about my projects, no feedback form, no lessons learned, just a transactional decapitation. I walked out of the building without a single backward glance. No slow montage. No coworkers chasing me down with hugs and tears. Most of them hadn't even noticed I was being gutted from the org chart like expired inventory. But I smiled. Genuinely, because this wasn't a loss, it was clearance for takeoff. The sun hit my face as I stepped out into the parking lot. I paused for a moment, feeling it on my skin like a reset button. I unlocked my car, sat down, and finally, let out a breath I'd been holding for months. And I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago. Cal answered on the second ring. They finally cut the cord, I said. About time, he replied. You ready? I looked at the glove box. Inside, a flash drive, 4 terabytes, labeled in Sharpie, unspun Truthmaster copy. Yeah, I said, starting the engine. Let's begin. The thing about lighting a fuse is you don't stick around to watch it burn. You walk away, you wait. Let it find the dynamite on its own, so I waited. 3 months went by, quietly. No headlines, no subpoenas, no dramatic stock crash, just silence. The kind of silence that settles in the office of a company too proud to admit it's rotting from the inside. I took consulting gigs here and there, risk audits for mid-size firms that still believed GOP was something you followed, not evaded. I rebuilt my routine. Woke up early. Yoga in the mornings. Breakfast that wasn't a desk granola bar inhaled between lies. I had time now, real time. The kind that doesn't feel borrowed from some spreadsheet's margin, but I didn't forget. Every week, like clockwork, I met with Cal. We'd go over the timeline. Emails, memos, decks, the doctored numbers from Roadshow Week, the Slack messages that hinted at deliberate obfuscation, the raw reports with my initials still embedded in the metadata. Everything was cataloged, cross-referenced, and locked into what Cal called the casebook. You've basically built a forensic museum, he said once, flipping through a binder thicker than a Bible. I shrugged. They handed me the hammer. Behind closed doors, things started slipping. I heard whispers. First from a friend still stuck in Derek's orbit, let's call her Lydia. She texted me a screenshot of a Teams chat, finance scrambling after auditors flagged a material inconsistency in Q4 revenue attribution. Words sounded sanitized, corporate, but I knew what it meant, they'd lied. And now the external auditors had finally caught the scent. A few weeks later, Lydia called. 2 of our biggest investors pulled out of the follow-on round, she whispered. One of them asked very specific questions about FY3, stuff no one outside the core team should know. I didn't say anything. I just nodded into the phone like she could hear me smirking. Then came the rumors, real ones. Not from Lydia, from the news. An anonymous post hit one of those niche finance forums, buried in a thread titled Something's Off at Neurolytica. It read like a conspiracy theory, shell accounts, inflated MRR, executive kickbacks. No proof, no sources, but people noticed. Twitter noticed. And when Twitter notices, so do the suits. The best part, every detail matched exactly what I'd been archiving. Word for word, down to the quarter. I asked Cal if he posted it. He said no. Then he smiled like a man who didn't have to. Behind the scenes, our file grew. Subfolders inside folders, client contracts, regulatory evasion patterns, internal memos, obstruction language. Cal had a contact at the SEC, not close, just close enough to get a call returned. We'll drop it when it's timed right, he said. When it hits the hardest. I didn't need to ask when. I trusted him. The man once buried a hedge fund CEO using only 4 invoices and a Dropbox link. And Derek? Still out there, still posting LinkedIn fluff about vision and grit. Still taking panels. Still collecting awards from people who hadn't read a single footnote in our financials. He thought the storm had passed. He thought silence meant safety. But silence is just the part where the walls shift before they fall. I watched from the sidelines like a demolition tech in a hard hat, knowing damn well the charges were already set. All that was left was the detonation. The LinkedIn post hit at 7:32 a.m. on a Thursday, like a fart in a crystal decanter. Thrilled to announce our latest $80M funding round. Huge thanks to our partners who believe in the vision. The best is yet to come. Rocket Blue hash scale with integrity hash future, focused. I almost dropped my coffee. Derek had attached a photo of himself mid-laugh, probably taken on purpose by some PR intern crouched like a sniper in the corner of an overpriced coworking space. The caption was pure smug. The kind of smug that makes people in real finance flinch. Integrity, he wrote, like the word hadn't filed a restraining order against him years ago. I didn't comment. I didn't share. Just texted Cal. He pulled the trigger. He called me 10 minutes later. They're ready. By noon, I was sitting in a windowless room on the 4th floor of a federal building where the thermostat had died sometime during the Obama administration. The kind of room where truths get peeled like onions, slow, wet, and with collateral tears. 2 agents. No suits, no sunglasses. Just notepads, calm eyes, and an attention span sharp enough to cut through fluff. I wasn't nervous. I'd already lived the worst part, watching them twist my work into a stage prop. This was the slow unfolding of justice. I said nothing at first. Just handed them a business card, Calvin R. Whitaker, SEC Defense and Whistleblower Counsel. One agent took it, read it, nodded, he's a pro. Then I handed over the flash drive, sleek, black, labeled in tiny white print, unspun Truthmaster archive zip encrypted. The other agent asked, military grade. I said passwords with my lawyer. They didn't blink, didn't flinch. They'd seen bigger lies fall apart on worse carpet. Then came the questions, nothing flashy. No TV drama lines, just clean, methodical unraveling. Can you explain this discrepancy in FY3Q2 retained earnings? Yes, I said. Line 311B. They recognized revenue for a contract that didn't exist yet. Approval wasn't signed until the next quarter. I flagged it. The final report deleted my annotation. Click. Pen scribbled something. What about the India subsidiary? There's a gap in the cash flow entries. They routed expenditures through a shell account in Singapore. I found the overlap in payroll disbursements. It's in folder 5, subfolder marked Southeast Deviation Chains. They looked at each other for a split second. That's when I knew they already had something. They weren't here to start the investigation. They were here to finish it. I kept answering, pointed them to specific documents. FY3 expense allocation tables. Slack messages where Doug asked if red flag was just a formatting color. Memos with changes tracked, redacted, then reinserted with new language so vague it could be used in horoscopes. When I mentioned the discrepancy in the R&D credit claims for Q1, fraudulent by any sane tax standard, the lead agent tapped his notepad once. Didn't ask me to explain it. He just said, yeah, we saw that too, and there it was. The collapse had started. Quiet, precise. I hadn't thrown a grenade, I'd handed them blueprints to a building already infested with termites. After the interview, I stepped outside into the sun. It was unusually warm for October. Crisp, clear, and humming with the buzz of something inevitable. Cal called before I'd made it to the sidewalk. They've had the subpoena for 2 weeks, he said. We're just waiting to see if your side matched the internal evidence. Did it? He snorted. They called it surgical. Congratulations. You're Exhibit A. I smiled, not from joy, from relief. Not because I'd won, but because the story was finally leaving Derek's mouth and landing in the record. The meeting was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. That kind of artificial urgency only insecure execs insist on, Derek's favorite power move. 16th floor conference room had been staged like a product launch. Branded pastries, iced coffee in glass carafes, and little place cards for each investor like this was a damn wedding. The screen up front glowed with the words Neurolytica Investor Strategy Session. Underneath it, a subheading I'll never forget, Accelerating Truth, Scaling Vision, Truth, that word again. Outside, a black Suburban pulled up and didn't leave. At 8:58, the door opened. Not for Derek, not for the board, for 3 federal agents in plain suits. One held a leather folio. The other 2 wore expressions that said, no, we don't want coffee. The room froze. One investor blinked like someone had slapped him with a cold fish. The VP of comms stood up, then immediately sat back down like she remembered she couldn't spin a subpoena. And Derek, he tried to smile. He stood slowly, hands slightly raised like he was stepping onto a stage he didn't realize was a courtroom. Gentlemen, he said, voice syrupy, rehearsed, I'm not sure what this is about, but I can assure you, we're in full compliance with all federal regulations. If you'd like to speak with our counsel, he didn't finish the sentence. Because that's when Cal stepped out from the corner. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. He walked forward, unhurried, like he'd been waiting in that room his whole life. In his hand was a matte black USB drive, the kind you only ever see in movies or real-life consequences. He placed it on the center of the table, right next to the fresh blueberry scones. 5 years of reports, Cal said, calm as a surgeon, unedited, time-stamped, with full version history. He looked directly at Derek. Password is unspun truth. One word, capital U, capital T. Derek's face did something I've never seen before. It didn't fall. It deflated, like someone had poked a hole behind his eyes and let the ego out. The lead agent nodded, opened his laptop, and slotted the USB in with the mechanical finality of a guillotine blade. The screen behind them, still cheerfully glowing with branding, flickered once. Nobody looked at it. The board chair, who'd been smoothing his tie nervously, leaned forward. What exactly is, Cal turned to him, evidence of securities fraud, tax evasion, false investor statements, the whole show? She documented everything. He didn't say my name, he didn't have to. They all turned toward the only empty seat in the room. Mine. They finally noticed it wasn't just empty, it was deliberately empty, like a pulled-out chair at a trial. Derek opened his mouth, probably to lie, to blame. Improvise some twisted version of events where he was just a visionary misunderstood by accountants. But the lead agent spoke first. Mr. Ainsley, he said, flipping open his folio, we have a federal warrant to seize all electronic devices, internal communications, and financial documentation relating to fiscal years 3 through 7. We'll also need access to your private Slack channel, the one called Visioneers Only. Someone choked on a mini quiche. VP of Finance stood up and said, I wasn't even added to that channel. One of the agents glanced at him. We know, the investors, stone-faced. One slowly reached for his phone like he was about to cancel something very large and very expensive. The board chair reached for his water glass and missed it completely. And Cal, he just stood there, watching, unmoving, a statue of inevitability. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks in on time, packs a USB and lets the silence do the rest. They were wheeling out the servers when I walked back in. Not dramatically, no slow clap, no dramatic turn in the doorway. I just stepped through the side entrance like I was still on payroll and made my way to the observation room above the board floor. The glass wall gave me a perfect view of the aftermath. Wires unplugged, monitors boxed, cell phones collected in Ziploc evidence bags. A quiet disassembly of fiction. Derek finally cornered. He stood near the head of the table where he used to deliver speeches about agility and vision. Now his mouth didn't move. His hands twitched, subtle like a man trying not to vomit on himself. He looked older, grayer, like someone had drained the serum from whatever fountain of youth his ego had been bathing in. He glanced up, saw me. It wasn't a stare, it was a flicker. Like he couldn't decide if I was real or just some moral hallucination come to haunt him. No smirk, no smug, just recognition. And behind it, fear wrapped in confusion. He opened his mouth, maybe to plead, maybe to ask, maybe to explain, but I didn't stop walking. I turned, left the building with the same calm I entered it. Outside, the sky had that pale, hollow brightness that only happens after storms. I stood on the sidewalk, pulled out my phone, and opened a new message. No greeting, no punctuation. Just one sentence typed with absolute precision. Guess my reports told the story after all. I hit send, and just like that, the circle closed. I didn't wait for a reply. There wouldn't be one, not this time, not from him, not from legal, not from the board chair who once told me to smile more in strategy meetings. They'd all be busy now, lawyers, investigators, auditors with teeth. The story Derek tried to bury had crawled out, zipped and timestamped, ready to testify. And me? I didn't feel powerful, I felt right. Because while they deleted files, I documented facts. While they scrubbed emails, I saved threads. While they built a story, I preserved the truth in plain language with math that didn't lie and footnotes they never bothered to read. Those reports, my reports, the ones he called cute, they're now exhibit in a federal case. Turns out the truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs a record. Thanks for watching, you Cubicle Warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the Coffee Pot strikes again.